The Shireth had ruled their quadrant for 12,000 cycles. Their cities floated in orbit around crystalline stars. Their ships bent gravity like silk between fingers. Enough. They shaped matter with thought, memory with light, and life itself with surgical precision. They called themselves ascendant. They called the rest of the galaxy transitional. Every child of the Shireth was engineered before birth, refined, optimized, strength elevated, precision of mind. Emotional control to perfect symmetry. They did not allow randomness. They did not allow weakness. And when Larry was born, the calculations faltered. Her neural lattice pulsed irregularly. Her bioluminescent skin shimmered in unpredictable patterns. Those delicate sensory filaments that allowed her species to sense intention in a room were too sensitive. She felt too much, too deeply, too uncontrollably. To the Shireth Council, she was unstable. To her caretakers, she was embarrassing. To her clutched sisters, she was something to be avoided. But to herself, Layari felt alive. She felt the hum of the planet beneath her feet. She felt the micro tremors in the air before storms. She felt joy like a rising tide and grief like gravity. And she did not know why those things were wrong. At maturity, when her generation was evaluated for ascension, entry into the cognitive network that unifies Shireth society, Layari was denied. Her mind was deemed incompatible, too emotional, evil, too unpredictable, human-like. The word was spoken like rot, human, the emerging species from the soul system, violent, primitive, emotionally unstable. Their wars still scarred their own planet, their governments fractured and reformed with alarming frequency. Their ships were crude fusion-driven constructs compared to Shireth's singularity drives. They were tolerated only because they were too insignificant to crush. And yet, when the Dominion withdrew from a disputed border region near human space, when politics demanded a quiet retreat, they left Layari behind on a barren world once used as an observation outpost. A world with thin atmosphere, a fading star, and no one who would hear her as she cried. Captain Alias Rowan of the United Earth Expeditionary Corps did not believe in destiny. He believed in probability, tactical positioning, and stubborn survival. The USS Resolute had been dispatched to survey abandoned Shireth installations near the edge of contested space. Officially, it was a scientific expedition. Unofficially, it was reconnaissance. Humanity had grown tired of being studied like an exotic pathogen. They wanted to understand their observers. The outpost was a skeletal ring of crystalline structures half buried in sand. Power signatures flickered weakly, and radiation storms from the unstable swept the surface in violent pulses. His sensors officer had said. But Elias had learned something about alien civilizations. They were never as thorough as they believed. He led the ground team himself. The storm hit as they crossed the central plaza. Sand turned to glass midair. Static tore across suit comms. And in the chaos, a faint energy reading pulsed beneath the debris. Not machinery, biological. They dug through fractured crystal and collapsed plating until they found her. Curled around herself, skin dimmed to a faint blue glow, filaments twitching weakly, not deadened. Elias stared through his visor at a being the galaxy considered superior. She looked fragile. He made the decision in under a second. Medevac, he ordered. No. There were protests from orbit, political ramifications, Dominion claims, risk assessments, quarantine protocols. He ignored them. Humanity had once been abandoned too by the galaxy at large, by hope, by its own better instincts. They knew what it meant to be left behind. Layari woke in a sterile white chamber filled with humming machines that felt crude but warm. The air was thicker. The gravity heavier, over by foreign biological signatures, humans, dozens of them beyond the walls. She felt curiosity, concern, fear, not hatred. That confused her most. When Captain Rowan entered her room for the first time, he removed his helmet slowly, deliberately. He was larger than her species, dense musculature, scars along his jawline, dark eyes that said he cautious intelligence. She braced for contempt. She sensed none, only patience. He spoke gently, knowing she would not understand the language, but hoping tone carried meaning. He placed a hand flat against his own chest, a universal gesture among humans. I mean, no harm. Lowry's empathic nodes trembled. No Shireth had touched their own chest in vulnerability before in another. Among her people, emotional exposure was inefficiency. Among humans, it seemed natural. Her biology required careful study. Human doctors worked tirelessly, fascinated by her cellular structure. Unlike the Shireth, they did not recoil at her irregularities, rated them. She adapts fast. One scientist noted, her neural activity spikes. When exposed to music, another observed. Music. They played orchestral compositions through her chamber speakers. The vibrations rippled through her empathic filaments, overwhelming her in waves of sensation. It was chaotic, unstructured, beautiful. She learned their language slowly, learned their history faster. World wars, civil collapse, reconstruction, a near extinction events from their own environmental negligence. And every time they fell, they rebuilt. Humans did not engineer perfection. They survived imperfection. Captain Rowan visited daily, never pushing, never demanding. He showed her images of Earth, oceans vast and untamed, forests dense with life, alive with millions of imperfect beings living side by side. Why? Help me? She finally asked one evening, her voice melodic but strained. Rowan considered the question carefully because someone should have. It was not a strategic answer. It was not political. It was human. And something inside Larry shifted. The Dominion noticed Shireth long-range probes detected human vessels lingering near former territory. They intercepted encrypted transmissions referencing a recovered biological asset that the Council convened. Lyari was not just defective. She was evidence. Evidence that their engineered superiority had discarded viable life. Evidence that a so-called primitive species valued what they did not. That could not stand. A Dominion warship slipped into the system without fanfare, sleek, luminous, bristling with weapons that warped space-time itself. Its captain transmitted a single message to the human fleet: return the biological unit, or face correction. On the Resolute, tension filled every corridor. Humanity was not ready for open war with the Shireth. Their fleets were smaller, their drive slower, their weapons less refined. The United Earth Council advised compliance. A political survival demanded it. Captain Rowan stood alone in Lyari's chamber, the message echoing between them. You are not a unit, he said quietly. She felt the storm of emotion with him, anger, protectiveness, fear he would not show his crew. You will suffer for keeping me, she whispered. Rowan nodded once. Probably he activated fleet-wide communications. His voice carried not just to his crew, but across every human vessel within range. We found someone left to die, he said. Not a weapon, a person. They call her defective. I call her ours, the HFY. There was silence. Then, one by one, humans shifted formation, not retreating, advancing. Humanity had been underestimated before, often. The Dominion warship fired first, a beam of condensed gravitational force that sheared through a human frigate's shields and crippling its engines. The response was not elegant, it was relentless. Human ships moved unpredictably, exploiting micro delays in Dominion targeting algorithms. They sacrificed optimal formation for adaptive chaos. Pilots made split-second decisions that no unified hive mind would approve. They were messy, they were loud, they were furious enough. And when a damaged human cruiser drifted directly into the Dominion's firing arc, its captain overloaded the fusion core manually, turning his own ship into a blinding spear of plasma that tore through the enemy's shield array. Not efficient, not refined, but devastating. The Dominion had calculated human fear. They had not calculated human loyalty. On the surface of the Resolute, Lyari felt every human heartbeat through the ship's hull. Their terror and their refusal to abandon each other. Something awakened in her neural lattice, her irregularity, her flaw. She reached outward, not into the structured network of her people, but into the chaotic symphony of human emotion. And she synchronized with it. Her empathic and amplified human intent across local space. Ships began anticipating each other's movements instinctively. Coordination tightened without formal command. Pilots described it later as feeling connected, not controlled, connect. For the first time, her difference was not instability. It was strength. The Dominion warship faltered under the unexpected cohesion. Human torpedoes breached its hull, its singularity drive destabilized. It retreated, not destroyed, but driven back, and the galaxy watched. News spread faster than any fleet. Humanity had defied the ascendant Dominion. For one abandoned alien, diplomatic channels erupted. Smaller species, long intimidated by REF's superiority, took notice. If humans would risk annihilation for a single life deemed worthless, what would they do for allies? The narrative shifted, not overnight, but undeniably. The Shireth Council issued formal condemnation, framing the event as human aggression. Yet internal analysis revealed something unsettling. Their predictive models had failed. They could not quantify compassion. They could not simulate sacrifice born from empathy rather than optimization. Layari stood beside Captain Rowan months later on a terrace overlooking Earth's Pacific Ocean. Wind tugged at her luminous filaments. The sun, yellow and steady, warmed her skin. She was no longer dim. Her glow shimmered with layered color, complex, unpredictable, vibrant. "You are not weak," Rowan said quietly. She considered the ocean's endless motion. "My people believed strength required perfection." She replied, "You have shown me it requires choice." Humanity began integrating her abilities, not as a weapon, but as a bridge. She assisted in first contact diplomacy with species previously wary of Earth. Her empathic sensitivity detected deception, fear, hope. She taught humans subtle emotional harmonics. They taught her resilience through failure. Together, they built something neither species had imagined, not an empire, coalition. And years later, when a delegation from the Dominion arrived, curious despite themselves, they found Layari standing not as an outcast, but as an ambassador. Not engineered perfection, but chosen family. The Shireth had abandoned her because she felt too much. Humanity embraced her because of it. The galaxy learned that day that strength is not measured in flawless design or ancient dominance. It is measured in who you refuse to leave behind. And under Earth's vast sky, with human hands resting gently against her own luminous skin, Layari understood something her creators never had. Imperfection is not a flaw in the design. It is the birthplace of courage. And in a universe obsessed with being ascendant, humanity chose to be compassionate. And that choice changed everything. Now, they measured her the moment she opened her eyes. In the dominion of the Shireth, birth not a miracle, it was an audit. Every neural pathway was mapped within seconds. Every synaptic bridge compared against 12,000 cycles, perfected genetic architecture. Her species had long ago abandoned chance. Children were engineered in crystalline gestation vaults, optimized for cognitive efficiency, emotional equilibrium, and psionic symmetry. They did not hope for excellence. They guaranteed it. And when Layari's consciousness flickered into being beneath the silver light of the birthing spires, the calculations began to fracture. Her neural lattice pulsed unevenly. Where others formed sharp geometric harmonics of thought, hers shimmered like disturbed water. Her empathic filaments, delicate sensory organs that allowed the Shireth to sense intention and probability, extended too far, too bright, too sensitive. She reacted to stimuli before analysis completed. She felt before she reasoned. The attending overseers did not speak aloud. They transmitted their findings through cold bands of directed thought. Variance detected. Cognitive speed below optimal threshold. Emotional amplitude exceeding acceptable parameters. Layari did not understand the data. She only understood the silence. In the years that followed, she tried to align herself with the symmetry of her clutch sisters. In learning chambers of floating crystal, they solved multidimensional equations before the instructors finished projecting them. They manipulated gravity fields with precise focus. Their minds interlocked in elegant collective constructs, thoughts flowing seamlessly from one to another. Layari lagged. When complex theorems unfolded before her, she saw not clean solutions, but spirals of possibility. She asked questions outside prescribed parameters. She lingered on hypotheticals long after the lesson had advanced. Her tutors marked delays as inefficiencies. Worse still was her emotional leakage. The Shireth valued control above all. Emotion was permitted only in calibrated doses, sufficient to motivate, never enough to destabilize. Layari's responses, however, surged beyond acceptable range. Enough. When a training construct failed, she felt disappointment like gravity crushing her ribs. When a fellow initiate stumbled, she felt their embarrassment as if it were her own. Enough. Her bioluminescent skin betrayed her, constantly flaring brighter with joy, dimming with sadness, rippling with anxiety. Her sisters learned to turn slightly away from her. To them, she was noisy in an otherwise flawless signal. By adolescence, the council had already labeled her file with a quiet designation, suboptimal cognitive yield. The phrase followed her everywhere. In psionic synchronization trials, she struggled to maintain stable harmonics. The unified mind of her generation felt like an ocean of precise, angular thought. When she entered it, her presence created turbulence. She sensed too much, microfluctuations of doubt, suppressed ambition, hidden resentment, currents her people preferred to ignore. Instead of contributing clean strands of logic, she introduced emotional interference. The instructors severed her from the network more than once. Contain your variance, they instructed, though the words were less command and more clinical correction. Layari tried. She meditated in isolation chambers, attempting to dampen the tides within her. She studied logic structures until her vision blurred. She forced her bioluminescence to remain steady when reprimanded. But the harder she compressed herself, the more unpredictable the pressure became. During her final ascension assessment, the evaluation would determine her integration in the Dominion's cognitive weave. She stood before the council in a vast amphitheater of refracted starlight. The elders hovered in silent judgment, their forms tall, luminous, perfect. She felt their scrutiny like scalpels. A series of intellectual constructs were presented, each more complex than the last. She solved some, faltered on others, not disastrously, not incompetently, but not flawlessly. Then came the emotional nullification trial. A projection formed before her, a simulated collapse of a colony habitat, thousands of Shireth lives mathematically extinguished. The test was simple. Analyze, strategize, respond without emotional contamination. Her sisters processed casualty projections within milliseconds. Layari felt the simulated terror. It flooded her before logic assembled. She felt the imagined suffocation, the abrupt silence of minds extinguished. Her empathic filaments flared uncontrollably, bathing the chamber in shimmering waves of color. Her solution, when it came, was innovative. Redirect energy through an unorthodox resonance cascade to stabilize the habitat core. It would have worked, but she delivered it with visible distress, her voice trembling, her glow uncontained. To the council, composure was competence. Enough. She had failed both standards at once. The verdict required no dramatic proclamation, was transmitted in a thin band of cold consensus. Cognitive capacity below Dominion mean. Emotional regulation insufficient. Integration into the cognitive weave denied. The words did not echo. They simply existed, immutable and final. Denial of ascension was not merely academic rejection. It was social erasure. Without integration, she would remain peripheral, barred from governance, from advanced research, from the shared immortality of collective memory. She would exist biologically, never fully belong. Her clutched sisters did not meet her gaze as they departed for ascension. And their thoughts moved together in rising harmony, leaving her mind abruptly alone. Alone was not a state the Shireth were designed to endure. In the cycles that followed, reassignment proposals circulated. She was evaluated for auxiliary roles, menial research support, environmental maintenance, distant observational posts. Positions require minimal cognitive authority. Each evaluation include the same notation, emotional instability risk. She read her own assessments in silence. Weak. Imprecise, below standard. It was not cruelty. The Shireth did not indulge in cruelty. It was efficiency. She did not meet the equation. Therefore, she was subtracted. Decision came without ceremony. She would be transferred to a remote monitoring outpost at the fringe of Dominion space. Limited contact. Minimal integration. A quiet solution to an inconvenient deviation. On the day of departure, no gathering marked her leaving, no exchange of memory strands. No acknowledgement of shared origin. As the transport vessel lifted from the crystalline platforms of her homeworld, Liari looked down at the perfect geometry of Shireth civilization, cities aligned with magnetic poles, energy lattices humming in flawless synchronization. She felt grief, not because she had been cast out, but because she still loved them. She loved a species that had measured her and found her lacking. In that realization lay the final confirmation of their judgment. She was too emotional, too attached, too slow to sever what did not serve her advancement. As the stars elongated into transit lines, Layari pressed her palm against the viewing pane. Her bioluminescence flickered, not in disciplined symmetry, but in chaotic living color. In a civilization that worshiped perfection, she was a flaw that refused to disappear. And so they sent her away, not with anger, not with hatred, but with the quiet certainty that she simply did not belong among the ascendant. They believed weakness should be removed before it spread. They did not understand that what they called weakness was something far more dangerous. The capacity to feel, the capacity to care, the capacity to choose connection over superiority. But in the dominion of the Shireth, such capacities were indistinguishable from defect. And Larry, brilliant and trembling and painfully alive, was left to drift beyond the edges of perfection, unwanted, unascended, and utterly alone. They did not grant her the dignity of execution. Execution implied danger. Execution implied consequence. Layari was neither in the eyes of the Valorian Dominion. She was malfunctioning equipment, and malfunctioning equipment was not destroyed in anger. It was discarded. The Valorians had refined themselves beyond what most species believed possible. Their cities orbited neutron stars in mathematically perfect lattices. Fleets moved as singular organisms directed by unified will. Individuality was tolerated only insofar as it served collective advancement. Efficiency was sacred. Precision was law. From her first neural calibration, Layari had been an anomaly in an empire that permitted none. Her cognitive scores fell within acceptable variance in isolated domains, but never in aggregate. Where her peers solved quantum recursion models in 7 seconds, she required 12. Where they maintained emotional stasis during neural compression trials. Her empathic signature spiked erratically. She hesitated during tactical simulations, not from confusion, but from considering collateral outcomes. Collateral sensitivity was lost, processing dragged. Her overseers did not scold. They added processing latency 4.3% above Dominion standard, emotional interference events, recurring collective synchronization, stability, compromised when integrated. The final assessment sealed her designation. Cognitive and emotional deviation, non-viable for ascension tier. Non-viable. The word followed her like a shadow. Valorian society did not imprison inefficiency. It did not debate it. It removed it. Those deemed actively destabilizing were dismantled, memories archived, biomass recycled, neural lattice repurposed. Layari was not destabilizing enough for dismantle enough. She was simply inadequate. Her empathic nodes registered nuance others ignored. She sensed micro fluctuations in shared thought streams, faint unease, but beneath calculated certainty. She felt the suppressed fear of entropy that haunted even the Dominion's greatest minds. Those sensations distracted her during convergence rituals. Her presence introduced static into the collective weave. Twice, entire synchronization sessions faltered when her emotional amplitude spiked in response to projected casualty simulations. She felt the hypothetical deaths as if they were immediate and personal. The others registered numbers. She registered absence. The High Synod convened in cold consensus. Retention offered no benefit. Termination offered no necessity. Solution disposal beyond operational sphere. The decision was transmitted to her without ceremony. You will be reassigned to autonomous drift. The phrase was antiseptic. Autonomous drift meant exile, not to a labor colony, not to a distant outpost. To space, they prepared the stasis pod in a maintenance hangar, usually reserved for obsolete exploration drones. The chamber was smooth, metal, impersonal. No ceremonial architecture, no symbolic farewell. Technicians calibrated the pod with the same indifference used when decommissioning surveys. Life support minimal but stable. Neural suppression active, trajectory unmarked, aim toward interstellar dark where recovery probability approached zero. Layari stood beside the pod, luminous skin dim into a pale violet. She sensed nothing from those around her beyond procedural focus. No Malasaro, only completion of task. I remain functional, she said once, quietly. A technician paused only long enough to verify her vocalization had not disrupted calibration metrics. Function does not equal value, came the response, flat and uninflected. Her empathic filaments trembled. She had known the verdict was coming, known it since her third failed convergence cycle. Yet standing before the open pod, its interior lined with nutrient gel and neural dampeners, reality settled into her like vacuum. She was not being punished. She was being archived in motion. As she lay within the chamber, suspension tendrils coiled gently around her limbs, securing her form. The gel rose slowly, cool against her skin, muting sensation. Aber, the lid remained open for final system checks. Searched the mental field for hesitation. There was none. To the Dominion, she was defective equipment, too emotionally volatile for integration, too cognitively inconsistent for advancement, too inefficient for resource investment. Discarding her conserved energy, preserved purity, a final diagnostic beam passed over her neural lattice. Deviation confirmed. Stasis engaged. The lid sealed. Darkness folded inward as neural suppressors activated, slowing her thoughts to a distant echo. Through the thinning edge of consciousness, she felt the pod transported, magnetic rails guiding it toward launch conduit. She wondered distantly if any record of her subjective experience would be retained. Valorians archived data meticulously, but only useful data. Her fear would not be categorized as useful. The launch sequence initiated without countdown, audible to her fading senses. External clamps disengaged. The conduit opened to void. For an infinitesimal moment, gravity shifted. Then she was expelled. The pod shot from the Dominion's perimeter like discarded debris. Engines firing briefly to ensure escape velocity before shutting down permanently. No beacon transmitted her location. No retrieval protocol existed. She became another silent object drift between stars. Inside her, metabolism slowed to near cessation. Neural activity compressed into fragile sparks. Emotion, once overwhelming, dulled to a distant throb beneath chemical sedation, but not extinguished. Even she felt something, not anger, not hated, loneliness. The Valorian Dominion receded behind her, a lattice of cold brilliance shrinking against the cosmic dark. Their fleets continued flawless patrol patterns. Their minds continued in perfect synchronization. Production quotas were met. Expansion projections recalibrated. Her absence registered as negligible variance. Within hours, her designation file was archived, her non-viable assets resolved. No monument marked her departure. No dissent rippled through collective thought. Efficiency metrics remained stable, and Layari drifted. Stars wheeled silently around the transparent canopy of her pod. Nebulae shimmered in distant color. Radiation whispered against the shielding. Time stretched. Meaningless, she had been measured and found insufficient. Not because she lacked intelligence entirely, not because she posed threat, but because she felt too deeply, processed too broadly, questioned too slowly in a civilization that worshipped speed. To the Valorians, weakness was not cruelty, it was inefficiency. And inefficiency had no place in a dominion that sought perfection. Encased in silent stasis, launched into infinite dark, Layari became what her people believed she always was: excess material, unnecessary complexity, a flawed component removed from an otherwise flawless machine. The stars did not judge her. They simply watched as she drifted farther from everything she had ever known, a single fragile life cast into eternity, not executed, not mourned, merely discarded.